Yo, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at 3 different deck setups. So we're going to be using the same base stats for everything, but we're going to be changing up our weapons quite a bit. And we'll be doing each with arena tests as well as invasions. So the base setup for this build is going to be level 125. We'll have 59 Vigor, 37 Endurance, as well as 60 Dexterity when we have Millicent's Prosthesis, and 20 Strength, which I like because then you have access to the Great Bow, which requires 20 Strength and 20 Dex, and I don't like that little message that comes up and it says you don't have the right strength requirement, even if you do when you two-hand it. So that's going to be the setup for this build, and then we'll be swapping around our talismans a bit, but we will be keeping this same armor setup. As always, if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I'd definitely appreciate it, but let's go ahead and jump into our first build. This one is going to be called the Zweikiba, and pretty straightforward. We're going to be using the Zweihander in our main hand and an offhand Nagakiba. So for this, we're going to actually need to use the Erdtree's Favor +2, just so we have a little bit more endurance and can kind of handle the weight of this build while still hitting the armor requirements that we'd like. Now, we aren't going to be running 109 poise with this, and that's going to be less of an issue because you just get crazy hyper armor with colossal weapons. So this is really nice. It has a true combo between the crouch poke into the offhand weapon, and then we also have access to Giant Hunt, which does substantial damage, as well as Unsheath, or if you do want to switch up your Nagakiba to something with Sword Dance, I definitely recommend that as an offhand option as well. As you can see there, we will be benefiting from Handy Tech if we want to, and overall I just found this to have great synergy. Offhand Nagakiba is always great, and you do have some good talisman options as well, so if you want to go for successive attacks, that's great. If you want to use your Ash of War more often, you could use the Shard of Alexander, or you can also include the Claw Talisman, or even the Spear Talisman would be a good option since you might be getting counter damage hits with the Zweihander. So a lot of fun options, and let's go ahead and see how this performs. Our first duel is going to be against a player that's running a fairly similar setup, so they're going to be running a Uggs at first, and then they will be pulling out an offhand Halberd. We get an early read and manage to knock them out of their air for their jumping attack and get quite a bit of damage. We do realize that there's some latency between us, so you can see in that crouch poke, we're just kind of feeling the net a little bit. So we're going to try to adjust. We fix our talismans real quick just so we're boosting our jumping attacks as well as our crouch pokes. And here we get another good read and anti-air them a second time. So they're, getting low on health, and we're able to actually get a true combo for the finish and just kind of avoid the extra range that they have with both of their weapons. Next up, we have a player running PSGS. However, they aren't running very much poise, which means our offhand weapon, the Nagakiba, is going to be really powerful against this player. So obviously, the Zweihander does a lot of damage, but being able to get a bunch of successive poise-breaking attacks in with the offhand Nagakiba is very, very helpful. So we do avoid some of the very high damage that's possible from the crouch poke, but we do get hit the second time, and you can see that we're throwing out a lot more Nagakiba hits, and when we do get them to connect, they do a lot of damage, and we do manage to get a nice crouch poke and true combo for the finish. Next up, we have a player that's running a kind of off-meta setup. They've got a Serpent Shield, which I would run a lot back in the day, and I really enjoy it. However, it's not very strong, and it's better at lower levels where it only takes one hit to proc poison, but at higher levels it does take more than just one hit with the L2 of the shield. So this player is now switching over to a Power Stance Katana setup. We get a nice true combo, and we follow that up with the Sword Dance on our Nagakiba and just a crouch poke for the finish. Now, we'll see how powerful these Ashes of War are when we take a look at the invasion setup here. So starting off, we're going to switch our talismans to try to get some health back as they kill slugs, and then we're going to just kind of unga bunga it and run in and grab that Giant Hunt on these players, and then swap over to our Nagakiba and use the Hyper Armor with Sword Dance to just try to get as much damage off as quick as possible. And because that has quite a large area of effect, we do manage to take out one player in the process. So really kind of capitalizing on the surprise of you being in the world and just kind of running in, Leroy Jenkinsing it, and doing as much damage as possible as quick as possible can really be helpful in turning a 3v1 into a 2v1. Now here we have an unfortunate moment where we're really stuck on the slugs, and we're you know, we're kind of using this small area to our advantage by being able to get Ash's War off, but it kind of cuts both ways, as it's difficult to maneuver, especially if you're backpedaling, which is kind of necessary in a lot of moments, especially when you have a player that's shield poking and then somebody else that's just kind of spamming L1s with power stance katanas. So we're walking a fine line here of taking advantage of the small space, but also just kind of getting some damage sent our way because of the small space. Now, the sleep pots are really going to be our friends in this situation, because the player that's shield poking, it's going to be super hard to guard break them. We can see them here as I swap over to the Hammer Talisman, and I get a fully charged heavy attack into their shield, and then follow it up with a crouch poke into their shield, and that does not guard break them. So at this point, I'm like, okay, I am not going to be able to guard break this player, so I should just sleep them. So I toss a sleep pot at the ground, take a little damage in the process, but I hear that they've both been slept, so I go for a turn and burn with Giant Hunt, which is super powerful, and then follow it up with another sword dance attack. And not sure where that hit went. It seemed to go straight through their body. They didn't take any damage, but we do follow it up with another light attack. Alright, next up we have the Shamrumi, and this is going to be a really high DPS weapon. We're going to have Millicent's Prosthesis, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, and we can either do Axe Talisman or Bulgo Talisman if you want to go higher damage or want to have extra poise. Both are great options, but one amazing part of the Arumi is going to be the true combo for the fully charged R2 into the light attack. We can also further buff this with Drawstring Grease, and we also have the offhand Arumi, and these two together are just really nice for kind of putting your opponent between a rock and a hard place. So if they're at a distance, you can go for something like the crouch attack, which has great speed and range, and once they come in, you can usually hit them, and then start swinging with the Arumi, and that just does a bunch of damage. So let's see how this performs in the arena and invasions. This first duel is going to be against a player that's using a fairly strange setup, but they'll be making liberal use of Endure, which is somewhat problematic for us. So they have a Clean Rot Night Sword in their main hand, and then they have a Seal for casting in their offhand. And it's just kind of difficult to play against this setup because the inability to poise break them makes things like Dragon Breath a problem. We were hoping to get the Frostbite off and knock them out of that Dragon Breath, but really the Endure makes it very, very difficult to do much against it. And they're also just playing quite passively. They're taking advantage of the fact that if we come in, we have to be very careful of both Catch Flame and the Clean Route, which both come out super, super fast. And then if we're kind of backing off a little bit, we know that they're going to be able to go for things like the Beast Incantation as well as the Dragon Breath. So it's just a difficult situation, and actually kind of similar to what's difficult about playing against the Arumi with offhand Shamshir, is that it's hard to find a good spot on the inside and it's hard to find a good spot on the outside. The fact that they have Endure really makes it very difficult to find a good spot on the inside when playing against them. So we're just doing our best to kind of come back, avoid the incoming damage, and get a bit of a lead on health since we've been pretty low for this whole time. We're throwing out a lot of Beast Roars just because we don't know if they're going to be going for their Dragon Incantations, and it's nice to kind of have that set up ahead of time because it takes a little while to just travel. And here they go for Endure, they roll, and that roll actually meant that they lost this duel because it delayed the amount of time before they went into their Dragon Incantation, and we're able to knock them out of it with Beast Roar. So we get the finish there and move on to our next duel, which is a player running Power Stance Katanas, and they get an unfortunate pivot. We get a good read on their jump attack and manage to knock them out of it, and here they just kind of come in a little bit too hot and heavy too early, and they take a lot of damage in the process. I'm definitely guilty of this, where I have a setup and I know it can do a lot of damage, so I just really try to run in and make it work, but it's not my turn yet. And so this player probably felt a little bit of that in that moment where we get a couple hits with the Arumi off and then the Shamshir as well. And here we delay our attack and get a nice dodge on their jumping attack, followed up with a free aim Beast Roar. Doesn't connect, but they're very low on health, so we can be kind of patient, and we try to just bait some rolls and throw out some crouching attacks with the Arumi. Those come out quite fast, and even if you can dodge them a couple times, it's hard to dodge them over and over and over again. And here we are able to catch them while they're in their attack animation for the finish. Next up, we have a player running a Clean Rot. So this is one of the strongest setups in the game, just a two-handed thrusting sword. They've also got a buff on it with their lightning grease, so we do need to be worried about that. But we can see just where this setup really shines as they try to get in and aggress on us. We just have so many options that kind of force them out. We get the Shamshir attack off and get a backswing that does a decent amount of damage because the backswing on the Shamshir is quite strong. And then here we have some options throwing out some heavy attacks with the Arumi, and we just kind of make it difficult for them to run in. Now, I would say, like, on paper, this matchup is probably better for the thrusting sword, but we kind of have the advantage of not many people are playing Arumi offhand Shamshir, and a lot of people play thrusting swords, so we're pretty familiar with their moveset, and we're able to come out with a victory there. Next up, we're going to have one of our 2 invasions for this build. This was actually a 2v2, which is a lot of fun, especially in the lakes, and we have Fashion Hunter as our co-invader. Now, this is a player that is quite good. They're as good as they are judgmental about fashion, which, you know, checks out for their name. So we'll see how they, you know, appreciate or don't appreciate my fashion at the end of the invasion. Essentially, it's a player that's running Halberd for me to fight, and then a player with Power Stance Cross Naginatas for Fashion Hunter to fight. So I kind of got the better matchup in this scenario. Cross Naginatas are not the most fun to play against, but Fashion Hunter is doing a great job of just drawing attention and letting me focus on the host here, and they actually do get the finish on the Cross Naginata player, just as we're kind of winding things down with our host. And here we can see the Fashion Hunter inspecting our fashion. We're running pure meta, and so we know that we've failed, and we go ahead and lie down as they point down to signify that we have not done anything interesting with our fashion. So unfortunate moment there, but we kind of knew we had it coming, since this is very optimal and not very chic, I would say. So moving on, we have a 3v1, and these players seem to be maybe farming the Albinaurics. We are quite partial to Lilbro, so we're sad to see them die, and we will do our best to defend their honor. So we're going to be going ahead and throwing out some Beast Roar. I would say this isn't maybe the cleanest invasion I've ever done. I'm still a little bit rusty after coming back from a bit of a break, and you'll see a number of rolls that maybe aren't necessary. Obviously, some unnecessary looking rolls are just part of invading because there's multiple players and you kind of have to be just taking guesses about who off screen is doing what. But like that roll right there, probably not the most necessary, but that's okay. We're down to a 2v1 and we get a nice hit with the Arumi off, doing maybe close to half their health. So not enjoyers of the bigger stat for any of these players really, and it was a little bit difficult to go for, you know, all the co-invaders before the the co-oppers before the host, just because the host was also running almost no HP, and we just had to kind of avoid getting them too hurt in the process. Like a second hit there probably would have finished the host, so we go after this right now, and we go for some swings with the Arumi. We're not able to, or with the Shamshir, we're not able to get them to connect perfectly. They've got Rivers of Blood going, so we're going to need to back off a little bit there, but we do have some little bros coming in, swinging their hammers and whatnot, which we do appreciate. It's good to see that. And we're going to go for Beast Roar, get this player quite low. We probably could have gone for Beast Roar again, but we were hoping to finish them off with some sort of melee attack, because just getting the finish with Beast Roar doesn't feel amazing, I would say. So here this host just keeps swinging. Eventually we have the opportunity to go for our fully charged heavy. We could have gotten the true combo, but they died before that combo was possible. Alright, so our last build here is going to be the Serpent Bone Bird, and that's going to be a main hand Serpent Bone Blade and then an offhand Halberd. And this setup you can again run for high DPS with Kindred Rot's Exaltation, or if you want to switch that over to the Bulgo Talisman, you can get that extra poise to hit the 109 cap. But we also will be changing up our helm and running the Mushroom Crown, since Serpent Bone Blade does do some poison buildup. And I just find you have so many nice instant poise break options with this setup. If your opponent is rolling in, then the uncharged heavy is really nice because it doesn't have much forward momentum, but if they're rolling away, you can oftentimes catch them with the Ash of War, which is going to be the double slash. And because because you just have so many either quick hits or multi-hits when it comes to this build, Millicent's Prosthesis as well as the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia are just going to be doing a ton of work to boost your AR. Plus, if you do manage to get that poison proc, you have the helm as well as the talisman to potentially boost that AR further. So I love this build. I think it's a super just fun way to run the Serpent Bone blade, and if you do get the AR boost from any of the kind of talismans or helm you have going on, you can two-hand your halberd, which already has really strong AR, and go for Sword Dance on it, which, you know, will just do so much damage if you have all the different AR boosts kind of running simultaneously. So yeah, let's go ahead and see how this performs in the arena and invasions. Our first opponent with this setup is going to be running Power Stance Moog. So these have crazy range, they also have blood loss buildup, and we're just going to need to be cognizant of those things. We're going to try to really reaction roll things, not get too crazy with panic rolls, just because the damage and vortex potential is quite high with our opponent's setup. And we're just going to kind of take our time. So we get a nice running heavy in, we try to follow it up with a roll catch on the halberd, but it does not connect. So we're just going to kind of play, again, fairly patiently and try to apply pressure. We do get a nice another running heavy in, and Serpent Bone Blade AR is pretty strong, so those running heavies are doing work, and here we get a nice roll catch followed up by a poke with the halberd for the finish. Our next opponent is going to be running a bit of a like int melee hybrid, so we're really going to be kind of patient when they throw out this first spell here, because it can just result in some true combos that we don't want to be dealing with. So we're going to be backing up until that hits the ground, and then we can be a little bit more aggressive. And here we're going to be able to get one running heavy, do a little bit of damage, take a trade, but we're up on HP, and we just get a really nice vortex here that does so much damage, and we do even get the poison proc as we go for the second part of our Ash of War. Our next opponent here is also going to be running kind of an interesting setup. They're running the Lucerin, which is a favorite from DS3, and we're going to go ahead, switch our talismans over to the correct setup here. They go in for running light attack, and we do catch them. It seemed like they might be going for some backstab fishing, just based on the way they were blocking and the way they were kind of strafing around me, but that's only really helpful if I go for a running heavy with my Serpent Bone Blade, so instead we're able to just hit them with the uncharged light attack or heavy attack on the Serpent Bone Blade. Next up we have a player that's running the Shamshir, and this person just they really like to mash. I was also partial to mashing in this duel, so we'll be throwing out some of our halberd pokes followed up with an uncharged heavy attack to catch them a little bit. We're up on HP, but it is pretty close, and that one final poke with the halberd just really got us in a great position to throw out a light attack and get the finish. Now, this next invasion is going to be a 2v2. We'll start things off with jinking our physic and just kind of cautiously approach these players. We don't know exactly what they're going to be running, and our co-invader has not joined the world yet. So we're just kind of antagonizing them, throwing some pots in their direction, seeing what we're up against. It's cross Naginatas, because most of the time it's always cross Naginatas. So we're going to be worried about the bleed. We're going to hop off of the bridge and just kind of take our time a little bit. I didn't have the best setup when it came to weight, just because I wasn't able to swap over to the Great Bow on this particular build if I swapped with my Serpent Bone Blade. So just note that I'm heavy rolling in this moment, and that you might want to adjust your armor if you're going to be swapping to the Great Bow. Just because, yeah, heavy rolling when you've got the Great Bow is kind of problematic, because the animation is so long for that Ash of War. But we do finally get our co-invader, and we start aggroing these players, because we definitely don't want to leave our co-invader out to dry, especially when the host is running cross Naginatas, and that can kind of just delete them very, very quickly. So we're focusing on the co right here, and they're not doing too much damage. They've only hit us once so far, and we get a nice vortex going with just the different Ashes of War, as well as the uncharged heavy and just the occasional poke from the offhand halberd. And now this player is quite low on health. They go for kind of a crazy turn and burn, but we're able to land a jumping attack for the finish, and then our co-invader also does what they need to do to help us finish off the host there. So this final invasion of the showcase is going to be kind of a 3v1, like players were kind of cycling in and out. things start off pretty good, where we're able to get a nice sword dance off on the one co-opper who's at half health and isn't really paying attention, and really we're just taking advantage of the fact that we have the element of surprise, and we want to do as much damage in that moment as we can. So kind of the highest DPS option with this setup right now is going to be the sword dance on the halberd. And we also have an opponent now, the host with the Albinauric head, just doing a lot of frostbite damage. They're running a pretty strong setup with the power stance Nagakibas, and they also have spinning slash on it, which is very, very strong. So we need to be a little bit more careful here. We get our Estus punished, which, you know, makes sense. They're running power stance across Nagakibas, which, you know, just have a great Estus punish with the jumping attack. And we're just trying to get out of this situation. Things are looking pretty dire. We're throwing out the occasional jump just to kind of keep up our momentum, keep moving forward. And we're going to be going for an Estus cancel here as we walk off the cliff. And we're in a slightly better spot now because we're going to be surrounded by PvE. Even though this isn't really like helpful in terms of how much damage they do, when they die, we'll get a little HP back when we swap that talisman, but turns out everybody just kind of bails and gets out of that area, so we take some time to get a little HP back, but the blue that has now come into the world is just casting a lot of spells in our direction, and a hallway is not a great spot to be when you're dealing with Stars of Ruin. So we back up a little bit, we see if we can kind of bait them back towards where we were. We'd be much happier fighting in that area with all the PvE rather than out in the open where we can just get hit with Stars of Ruin over and over again. Here we have a bad moment where we just roll a little bit too early and get hit for a lot of damage with the Moonlight Greatsword, but we're kind of back in the right rhythm of how we need to roll, and we get the blue very close to death, but the Co does come in and just kind of save the blue in that moment. So we need to continue to backpedal, and again, we're kind of not healing here. We want to bait them back towards the PvE, and we're also going to try to use that talisman that will give us HP as PvE is killed. In an area like this, that can be super helpful because there's so much PvE. So we go ahead, turn on our lantern, and then we swap over to the Taker's cameo right as the blue starts going for some damage on the PvE. So that's kind of perfect. That's exactly what we're hoping for. We're hoping they're going to be kind of annoyed by this, and they start trying to kill the PvE, which lets me focus on this player here, one of the Co for the hosts, and we get quite a bit of damage and followed up with a sword dance. Even though their rolls were pretty well disciplined when we were going for the pokes, we're able to catch them with the second swing of the sword dance. And then the blue is also just kind of alone at this point. We're slightly less worried because the host has again bailed entirely, and now we're finally alone with the host. So in the run back, the host does summon another player. They start running up the bridge, and we go for our Ashavor with our great bow. We're not able to get anything to connect, but we're hoping we might be able to ride the lift back up and face them. However, kind of predictably, as we go for the pull, they go for the disconnect, or the fog wall rather. So we didn't get the proper finish, but it was definitely a good invasion, and just kind of felt good to get back in the swing of things. So yeah, that pretty much covers these three builds. I hope you enjoyed this format. If you did, definitely let me know. It's a little bit different than my last video, but yeah, thanks so much for watching, and as always, if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I would appreciate it.